computer. Fabulous. Okay. Okay. Um, so this is day 2 of ART 6650. And just as a reminder, I've got 2 screens going. There's one of just me talking, and then there's one of my workspace. And so that is my hand. If you've got me in gallery view, you might see me waving my hand back and forth. And depending on what I'm doing, feel free to like toggle back and forth between just me like looking at the camera and talking, or the camera from my workstation. My studio's, the orientation is a little unusual. So at a certain point today, I think what I'm gonna do is actually angle my camera up so it's facing on my work wall, and I'll probably stand up and actually kind of work on the wall and talk so you can hear me. So just to recap, yesterday what we were doing was some comparison exercises. We were looking at different sets of objects that were similar but not the same, and drawing in such a way to highlight their similarities and also highlight their differences. We should have 6 sets of drawings that probably look something like this. This is a Tupperware container, clearly, obviously. Never, couldn't mistake it for anything else. And today what I want to do is actually start to work with these drawings and think about like how to use these drawings as a way to generate more material that we can then work with. So what you're gonna need today, you're gonna need your large sheets of packing paper or newsprint paper. You're gonna need your drawings. You're gonna need your finder, and you're gonna need an ink pen or a Sharpie, anything that can make a continuous line. So I would kind of get those things together. Okay. I'm giving myself like 5 pieces of my packing paper. It's gonna make like a little stack. And if you just give me 1 minute, I'm actually just gonna tape these to my wall back here because I think it's gonna be easier just to get them out of the way while I explain what's going on. So just give me 1 second. And most of them just fell on the ground, but that's okay. There's one of them is still up. Okay. So with these drawings, I want to emphasize something that I think like, you know, we can kind of sometimes forget. Like these, although they appear to be very non-representational in scribbles and just sort of a bunch of lines or marks in the paper, these came from our like looking at the world. We were looking at an object, we were looking at something, and we were observing its physical properties, and we were translating those into a line-based tangle on a page. yesterday I was talking about my enthusiasm for blind contour drawings because I see them as this way to sort of translate like the eye and the body and like the brain into like it all kind of gets compacted into a drawing. And so there are these like really interesting little um, networks of marks that exist on a page, but it can be sort of hard to know how to use them. And so what I like to do is I actually like to sort of look at them in a completely different way. Oh my gosh, I just realized I totally forgot to do the shadow thing. We need to do our shadow. Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. So let's put a pause on that. So everyone grab your sketchbooks. We're going to do 3 minutes of shadow observation and then we're going to start working. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. All right. So go ahead and dim your lights in your room. And look at that place where you found your shadows yesterday. And on that same page in your sketchbook as before, go ahead and write another date. Today's date, which is the 23rd, I believe. Yeah, 23rd. And go ahead and try and actually see more than you saw yesterday. Don't just necessarily repeat what you wrote yesterday. And if you can't think of anything to write, go ahead and actually draw the shadows. You can draw them with contour drawings, you can draw them with value drawings, you can draw them with blind contour drawings. You know, that, as we found out yesterday, drawing is a way of looking. So I'm gonna go ahead and time you guys. 3 minutes of shadow observation starts now.
Hey, I have a question. Is this for, are we using the pen or the pencil or marker?
Write with whatever's available. Then you can write with whatever you got.
Okay, and forgive me, I must have skipped part of something. Is it, so you're writing, so this like a written description, or is this a written description, or is this a sketch and writing, or?
It can be both. You're looking at a shadow system on your wall, and you're just describing it in written words, or you can draw it, and just let yourself write whatever comes to mind. Don't worry about editing. You can write whatever you want, and we're going to repeat this every day.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, that's time. 3 minutes. All right, guys. Okay, so um, the reason we do that is because I am a big believer in like the more that you look, the more that you see. And so the idea behind this exercise is whatever you looked at and wrote about today and yesterday, you're also going to look at tomorrow and the day after and the day after. And we'll repeat this all 10 days and continue to look and continue to write. And I want you to really kind of just actively try and be aware of like how what you're seeing changes from day to day. Inevitably, there will be days where you're like, I really just don't see anything different. it just it looks the same. I can't believe he's making me do this. And yet, there will also be days where it's like, oh my gosh, I actually never really noticed that there's this aspect of it. And it could be the way something, it could be the way that it looks. It could be what it makes you think of. Because you know whatever it is you're looking at, it will change to a degree from day to day. But of course, you also change from day to day. So your perception that you bring to this thing, whatever you're looking at, changes from day to day. And I like this sort of like this exercise of writing about and looking at the same thing every day for a series of days in a row, and kind of pushing through the point where you feel like you have nothing else to see, and then continuing to see more. So that's what this is all about. So we'll start every day by doing that. Okay, to return to what I was actually originally talking about. So let me see if I can get my, there we go. Okay, I've got my camera, my phone on my workstation. I'm gonna go ahead and make that larger. Okay. So this is my drawing that I made of my Tupperware from yesterday. And it's just a regular old contour drawing. I did mine with Sharpie because I wanted it to be really visible, like over the screen. And like it can be, there's a lot of really good stuff in here to use, and to kind of like move. I can really use this drawing in a lot of different ways to move on to the next thing. And as I mentioned yesterday, I'm really interested in projects and artworks and exercises where we don't really make like a finished thing. We make one thing that gives us an opportunity to sort of make another thing, or sort of like everything becomes generative of something else. And so nothing is really a finished thing. And so here is a finished blind contour drawing. But it's hard for me to sometimes know what to do like with this in order to make it something else. So that's where the Finder really comes in. If I take my Finder and actually put it on top of my contour drawing, like all of the sudden, I'm able to focus on these little areas of line, and I can find these really interesting compositions, these really interesting arrangements or compositions of line. Oh, got somebody waiting in. Okay, here comes Ayana. Okay. Are you back? Okay. Ayana, did you get kicked off? Okay. I think she's here. Yeah, okay, she's back. All right, good. All right, let me pin that video again. Okay. So I can use my Finder to actually find these small compositions of lines. And there's no real rhyme or reason to this. Like what I basically do is actually just move this over and around my drawing until I find a composition that is just interesting to me. Maybe like I want to include my little like tangle right there, or maybe I actually like the way these lines break up my interior space, okay? But what I'm gonna ask you guys to do today is to isolate a composition that is interesting to you. and then to actually translate that composition onto your larger sheets of newsprint. So I'm going to demonstrate. I'm just going to take some tape. You don't have to tape. You don't have to tape yours down. I'm going to tape mine down just because I'm demonstrating. I'm going to take my tape and just attach my finder. So that's kind of my composition right there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually okay. Can you guys see me okay? Okay. So I've got my little composition here, and I've got my large sheets of newsprint here. And this is obviously a square. This is obviously a rectangle. If I wanted to be like, if I wanted to kind of make things easier on myself, I can actually take my newsprint and cut it down into a square.
Brian, can you move your camera over a little bit? You're on the right, all the way to the right side of the screen.
Okay.
You just can't see all of. Is it just on my screen?
Are you looking at both cameras? He's on both?
No, I only see one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So, do you see me now?
I do. Yes. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That did help, though. That did help.
It did help. Okay. So I am looking directly at the camera that I want you to be looking at, but then there's another camera of me from the side. Does that make sense? Okay. So here we go. I've got my square pieces of paper, and I've got my square composition here. And what I can do is I can just translate that drawing. And it does not, you should not worry about making it exact. So what I like to think of with this process is that we're basically making like a blind contour drawing of our blind contour drawing, right? I mean, it's like, rather than draw an object, now I'm looking at the drawing that I've already made, this tiny little one here, and I'm recreating all those large contours on a larger surface, okay? And it's like, I don't want to pay too much attention to like, am I doing this right? Does it look exactly like it? Because that's going to take me out of the experience of looking. But you'll also find inevitably that when you turn something much larger, it translates into something else. So it actually has quite a different feeling. And you know, like I often find that like something that maybe was not as interesting to me on a small scale becomes more interesting to me on a large scale. and then vice versa. Something that was very interesting to me on a small scale becomes less interesting on a large scale. And so, or, you know, the parts of it that I thought were really cool on a small scale are like maybe less interesting. But what I would like to do is to actually spend the first part of today making some larger translations of these drawings. So what I'm gonna do, what I'm gonna encourage you to do is to isolate an area. Let me think about this. I'd like to really give us like a lot to work with. So I think for each drawing that you made, I think I'd like you to isolate 3 areas with your finder and make 3 translations, okay? So you've got 6 small contour drawings, and you're gonna find 3 small details of those contour drawings and make 3 larger translations. So that's gonna be 18 large drawings, which is like kind of a lot, but I think it'll give us a lot of material to work with, and I think for the next part of this process, we'll actually be much happier because, of course, the same way that we're using these to generate these, we're going to use these to generate something else. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to change this to gallery view so I can see you guys. Yeah. Okay. So, are there any questions about this? Lori, do you have a question? Nope, you're good? Okay. Does this make sense what I'm doing with the finder, how I'm kind of isolating one area of it?
It does. I'm using my iPad, so if I want to, you're on one screen and I have to swipe the other screen to see your active drawings, so that's what I'm doing when I'm doing this.
Oh, okay, okay, sure. Yeah.
But I understand, thank you.
Okay. So when you're choosing details, let me get this down so I can put it on screen. Okay, I'm gonna angle this down. There we go. Okay, there's. Okay. So I'm gonna talk about something that I'm doing on my phone cam. Okay. Okay. So when you're choosing details to isolate from your 6 contour drawings, I recommend a variety. You're gonna wanna find details that maybe are actually quite simple. Like notice here how just these 2 lines break up the interior of my finder. I'm gonna bring that close to the camera. They break up the interior of my finder into just a few large shapes. That could be very, very helpful, okay? That can be one of your translations. In fact, it should be. You shouldn't feel like you have to do 18 drawings that are like super dense with like a lot of linear information. I actually think that something as simple as this could be really helpful, okay? I think it's probably best to get a mix. You're gonna wanna mix of both. So definitely do some that are dense that have kind of more networks of lines, but also allow yourself the freedom to make some that are more open and have fewer networks of lines. I mean, this composition really just breaks the interior of the finder up into 2 shapes. What we're gonna do with these, and this, I'll tell you the next step, this may actually help you make your decision now. We're going to be applying color to the backs of these drawings and then cutting them cutting them apart upon the lines to make a bunch of colored shapes and then using those to create collages. So we're ultimately gonna be making painted paper collages out of abstract shapes that are derived from our own blind contour observational drawings that have been translated from a scale like this to a scale like this. So that's kind of like the ultimate goal. That's what we're happening here. So for that reason, you're probably gonna want some that are larger and more simple right alongside some that are kind of sharper, and more dense. You know what I mean? But like I said, don't feel like it has to be an exact translation, because if you let yourself kind of get nervous, like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. Like there's no wrong way to do it, right? You're just using this as a way to kind of get to the next thing. So let's go ahead and get started. By the way, Alice, I did not write your email back, but I really thank you. Thank you for your email. That was very sweet.
He was so excited. In fact, last night I called him after I had finished all my stuff. I called him into my little makeshift workroom, and we did contour drawings for like well over an hour. And then my daughter came in and did it too. It was really fun. I'll have to show you some of his sometime.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I love that.
And he's not my he's my very, very active one or more active one. They're both active. But and so is not typically all into the sit down and make art. So that was really fun for me to be able to do that with him.
Yeah, yeah. My fiance has a niece and nephew who are 5 and 7, or 4 and 7, 4 and 8, like around there. And their mom is actually his sister-in-law. She's really crafty and she's really into arts. And I've been kind of getting to know her and sort of getting to know the niece and nephew. And like I think she's become a very big fan of me because they came over to visit recently. And I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna do what I do and like do like, but like have like an art class for like one afternoon just to have these kids do something. And they were totally like into it. And the mom was like, this is amazing. Like I've never seen them be this still for this long. Like if you want to babysit all the time, like, let's just let me know. And I was like, right.
Does your finder have to be a square?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. I think I made mine, the ones I sent to you guys, I made them a square because like some people find it easier to translate what they see here to a piece of paper that's the same proportions. And so it's obviously really easy to make any like a rectangle into a square, like no matter the size. Like I just kind of chopped the bottom off of mine. But if you wanted a rectangular finder, you absolutely could use one. And I imagine some of you guys probably use these like in your classrooms. Have you ever employed these? No. Lori, I'm seeing that you have. What grade do you teach?
9th through 12th.
Okay, so you're high school. Okay, wonderful. And so, what do you call it a finder? What do you do with it?
I call it a viewfinder. Yeah.
Viewfinder? Okay. And is it just a way for finding compositions, or?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like
It's a great tool.
it's great, and it's obviously very low budget. And I like to connect it with my college students. I like to connect it to framing a photograph. And they're sort of already familiar with this idea because everybody has a camera on their phone. But the idea that you can kind of actually frame a photograph in a way that makes it more dynamic, I think that makes a lot of sense to them.
Hey Brian,
Yeah.
how many of these do we need to make again?
18. So you're kind of doing 3 details off of all 6 of your contours.
Okay, just
Yeah.
double checking.
Yeah. I am putting together some slides I want to show you guys for sort of the next part of this. So I'm just kind of like staring at my computer and kind of moving my eyebrows around. It's not because I'm like shopping for furniture on Craigslist. I'm like actively like working. I mean, you never really know, right? You don't really know what people are doing in this format. We got a cat. I'm going to step away just for 1 minute, folks, but I'll be right back. How we doing? Good, good. I see some thumbs up. Good, good, good. Oh, goodness.
I'm at 9.
Okay. I'm sorry. And Ayana, there she is. Ayana, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. I was away from the screen for a second. I didn't see that you were waiting to get in.
That's okay.
Yeah. So do you keep getting kicked off?
Yeah, I don't know. I've got all the bars for my Wi-Fi signal, so I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. 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 This is, I mean, I think everybody would agree with me. This is not an ideal format, you know? I mean, like we're all making do, but I am ready for, as soon as we can move on from this, I would be ready for that.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. Normally at this point, I would be kind of coming around and sort of like checking in with each one of you and like getting to know you and like, you know, like chatting and things like that.
Yeah.
Although I'm kind of getting to know you because I get to see a little bit of everybody's like kitchen or living room or studio, or your cat walks by or a kid, you know.
Are we still drawing or?
We're still drawing. Yeah,
Okay.
we're still drawing. The goal here is to generate a whole lot of material that we can then use. And I find like when I'm doing things like this, like I'd rather have kind of more too much than too little. So I like to sort of draw a lot and kind of make a lot so that I can then kind of repurpose and reevaluate and have a lot of things to choose from.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not, so that's good. I just wanted to make sure we were all still on the same page.
No, you haven't missed anything.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. How's this going? Is it hard? Is it repetitive? Is it interesting?
I'm finding that a lot of the same. I basically, despite what drawing I'm on, I have a very similar line style, like consistently.
Oh wow. Okay.
Which is
Okay.
very,
Like big to small.
like I just I don't know. I didn't know this about myself, but apparently the way I draw is very like kind of whimsical and like I don't know. Does that? I don't know if I show you, then maybe you'll understand. Here, let me show you.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. What's it?
That was the plant I did.
Uh-huh.
This is the elephant I did.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah.
Um, this is a plant.
Okay. Okay.
This is an elephant. This is an elephant.
Okay. Okay.
Everything's like the same.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense? It's like all of it's like, I don't know. I'm not even making any sense.
No,
feel
no,
like-
no. I think you are. I think you are. I mean, I can kind of tell a difference between like more organic lines and more geometric lines. But like the quality of line for sure is, I think, consistent throughout. But I also think that like, you know, you can't get away from your nature as like somebody who makes things. It's like that's kind of like every artist's little task is to sort of figure out like what is the way that I do things that is unlike anybody else, and how can I kind of like arrange my ideas so that kind of those unique qualities are showcased. And it's harder than it sounds. it takes like a really long time, you know. But yeah, that's a cool thing to sort of see about yourself.
I've never done contour drawings before. I don't know. That was never in my art education growing up. So
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, yeah. No, I'm
fascinating.
I'm a fan because it's just, the thing is, if I said to you guys, okay, everyone just draw a bunch of abstract shapes, it's like, if you just have to, if you're just put yourself in a position where you're trying to invent, I think that's like really challenging, and you know, you would end up maybe doing like 5 things like over and over and over again, you know, because I just think it's very difficult to like make stuff up. And when I was very young, I thought to be a real artist, you had to just like make everything up and be endlessly imaginative. And as I went to school for art, I realized that actually there's all these ways that you can sort of just kind of like rearrange things that you see and things that you already know. I'm not explaining this very well. Let me say it a different way. I think the more I do this and the more I teach, I think real creativity is not necessarily in invention. It's actually in the ways that you kind of combine things. Like that, like creativity is actually taking 2 things that maybe don't necessarily, you wouldn't have expected go together, and finding a way to bring them together. Like that to me feels like, I think that's where like creativity lies, as opposed to like inventing something from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And so like what we have done is sort of use this process that is like very low stakes and requires really no skill to create these drawings. And now we're sort of looking at them in a different way in order to make them into something else. And then we're going to make them into something else, and so on and so on and so on. And so it's like we're kind of combining things in different ways. And I find that just much more, I don't know, just kind of affirming, more interesting, and it's less isolating. Like I don't know about you guys, but I get kind of intimidated by like a blank page in a sketchbook. You know, when there's just like a big white square, I'm just like, I don't really know what to do. I feel like I'm kind of better if I have something to sort of respond to as an artist, And I like this process because I get to respond to something I've already done.
I agree, and I think it's relaxing for me because I'm extremely detail oriented. So like telling me not to do anything with detail is like it's like
Yeah.
a breath of fresh air. So it's really cool. I mean, I'm like totally loving this.
Yeah. I actually I put together a group of artists who sort of use some of these techniques, and I think what you'll quickly see is that there is actually a space to be detail oriented if you want, and there's also like ways to sort of proceed without being detail oriented at all, and like they yield, like those approaches yield really different kinds of work. Because I actually think I'm a pretty detail oriented person too. And my undergrad was in printmaking, which is like, it's like the art form that's tailor made for people who are like basically anal retentive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like if if you tend to be kind of fussy and sort of like, you know, just like things just so like I feel like there's a lot of, it's an art form that can kind of absorb a lot of that energy. You can't really be fussy and just so with painting, I think. But printmaking, you absolutely can.
Okay, I see you.
Yeah.
I haven't done a ton of printmaking, so that's probably why I don't even know where. I know it's a lot of carving, right? Because you're carving. I mean, that's what we're doing, right?
Yeah, there is a lot of carving, and it is. I mean, there's a few different forms, but it's like there's a lot of carving. There's a lot of keeping things clean. There's a lot of like making. There can be a lot of measuring. Let me check in with Roxana. Roxana, are you back? Can you hear me?
I can definitely hear you, but I don't think you guys can see me.
No, we can't see you. So you got booted off for some reason?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. If you want, my go-to fix for when the video is not working is just you can close Zoom down and then open it back up. And if that doesn't work, then you can just restart your computer, and that works every time. I'm not sure why, but periodically Zoom, it's like the audio works, but the video doesn't. But we're going to continue to draw around, I think, 9:45, which is in, I guess, like 6 minutes. We'll probably put the pause on this and take a quick break and then come back. So you've got some time if you want to actually restart your computer.
Okay, I'll try that now. Thank you.
Okay. So how are we doing? What number are we up to in terms of drawings?
I have a question. I have 3 left, but are we supposed to be like keeping track of what drawing is from what object?
Not
or what? Okay, good.
Not at all. In fact, I actually think like it's almost better if you forget. You know what I
Good,
mean?
because I forgot after like number 3.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's kind of a lot to keep track of.
It is.
It's kind of a lot to keep track of, but you know, it's really just a way to generate shapes that are interesting, and that you would not have drawn on your own.
So I'm in my classroom for like the first time in forever. And I'm right. I have a big window. I'm really lucky, but I have a big window outside. And this is the first day that they've allowed the football team to practice.
Oh, wow.
And I'm watching these poor guys. They are running up and down this hill. You know they have not practiced on their own. You know they haven't. I keep looking out there and I'm hearing the coaches yelling at them, and they are dying, those poor guys.
Sure. Yeah. Where?
So my boyfriend actually, he's a teacher in Forsyth, and he just left for their first football practice of the summer. They have to wear masks the whole time that they're doing it.
Well, ours don't. They did take all of our temperatures before we were able to come in, but
My school is still closed, but they just started, like, they're going to have kids pass out. It's crazy.
these guys definitely are. It's so
Yeah. Lori, where are you?
I am at Spalding High School in Griffin. I'm about 45 minutes south of Atlanta.
Okay. Okay.
And
How hot is it there?
I mean, it's really overcast today. So it's not like 90 degrees. It's just super humid.
Yeah.
Yesterday was hot. When that sun comes out, it's hot, but they're lucky it's overcast.
Yeah. It's been pretty hot. Yesterday was a hot one up here. So I'm in Indiana,
Oh,
which is like I was actually talking about this the first day of class. I just moved up here at the beginning of this month, and because the class was going to be online, Piedmont was okay with me like living out of state and teaching it.
that's perfect.
Yeah, it worked out really well. But like this is like the first thing I've done in this studio. So
Yeah.
I like worked like a madman. I mean, I got here and then my pod was delayed, and they dropped off the pod and I had to like unload it really quick. And before I could really set up the house, I was like, I have to set up the studio because I have to like teach a class in there next week. We made friends with our neighbors, and we were able to borrow their truck to bring some of the big stuff over here. But
Nice.
yeah. But yeah, it's I'm in Lafayette, Indiana, and so the big college here in town is Purdue, which is like about 40,000 students. So it's like on par with the University of Georgia.
Wow.
Yeah, and they are, I mean, they're in the midst of trying to essentially figure out how they're going to do the fall, and you know, they're trying to take all the precautions seriously. But that's, I mean, you know, right now it's like a small town that doesn't have this itinerant population, and like the second week of August, like 40,000 people are going to come here, and they like all need to use restrooms. They all need to eat in cafeterias. They all need, I mean, it's like,
What do you do?
yeah, I do not envy the administrators who are responsible for these positions, none of whom are epidemiologists. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, you know, everybody is just flying blind on that.
The logistics of it, oh, I can't even imagine.
I know. And I have, the entire time I was in Georgia, you know, like March up until through May, basically. I mean, I really was, well, I lived by myself. So I was just doing my online thing. I had my setup. I left the house one day a week in the car to go to the grocery store. And then I would like go out on walks or like go on a run, but like that was it.
Yeah.
Since getting up, I was really nervous about moving and having movers in the house and all that stuff. But since getting up here, I've actually felt myself start to kind of relax in a way. I sort of have to stop myself every now and then being like, you know, this is not over. And the other day I ran into Home Depot without a mask because I just didn't have it in the car. And I was like, oh, I'll just be fast. I'll go in and out. And it's like, as if being quick like means that I would somehow like speed has nothing to do with it, you know.
Right. And if you go, I find myself like, if I just don't make eye contact with people, I'm far enough away. Just make sure I don't
Right.
make eye contact, and that'll be the thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, we were grocery shopping on Sunday, and we were both wearing masks, and we actually saw in the grocery store that same neighbor who had let us borrow her truck, and she probably, just like all of us do, she had forgotten to bring her mask with her, so she was in the store without a mask, and she made eye contact with us, and she instantly became like sheepish, like she felt like she was doing something wrong.
Right.
It was just like, I mean, we're all flying blind here, you know.
Yep.
Okay, so it is 9:50, and what I like to do is just sort of take like a pause, like at kind of a halfway point. I think this is a good halfway point. So let's all, I'm not going to end the meeting, but we can all like run to the restroom, get water, get coffee, whatever we need to do. And when we come back, I want to kind of go through the process of mixing up paint and color, and just sort of talk about, I think, some best practices for sort of applying color to these guys. And I've got my paints all set out, and I'll do a little bit of a demonstration on screen. I'll talk about painting. We'll do some painting as a group. And then I think I have a PowerPoint that I'd like to show you guys that goes over some collage artists and collage techniques, just to kind of get your gears turning. And I will share my screen and go through that so you all can see it. But I've also uploaded the PowerPoint itself to the course canvas. So I'll go through it with you guys, but it's also there so you can check it out later. And then we'll probably end the day by cutting things up. And then I kind of want to get all the way to that point, because Wednesday, tomorrow, we're not going to meet on Zoom, and it's just going to be a true work day. So we'll kind of today get to the point where we're starting to make our collages, and then Wednesday is dedicated entirely to making your collages. And you can, of course, work between 8 and 12, which is sort of the normal time of the class. But because we won't be meeting online through Zoom, you feel free to work at your own pace whenever you want, and we'll check in together on Thursday. Okay? But I'll go over all that again. Let's go ahead and take a little break, and feel free to walk away from your screen. And I've got 9:52. Can we come back at like 10:10? Can we come back on screen at like 10:10? Sound good? Okay, cool. So you guys then, I'm not going to end the meeting. So it'll still be kind of here. If you want to walk away, you can log back in. right, we're back to recording. Here we go. Okay. So if you haven't finished all of your contour translations, it's okay. We can sort of finish those on our own time. Because what I do want to do today, like I was saying, is kind of get us through sort of the next part of like instruction. So by the end of today, everybody is in a place where they're either ready to start working on their own, or if they're not, they know what they need to do so that they can kind of get there. And then, as I mentioned before breaking, tomorrow we've got built into our schedule like a true work day. So it's going to be all about collage all day long. But before we start making our collages, I want to actually introduce color into the equation, which is always kind of like makes things really interesting. And what do I want to say about color? Well, I guess I kind of think like color is like its own world. And I think that like everybody kind of has their own relationship to it. I know many people and I admire many artists who just choose not to deal with it at all. Like they just kind of take color out of the equation. They might only work with value. They might only work with black and white. And I think that that's like totally legitimate. I am somebody who really enjoys color. So like I do kind of like working with it, but like I won't lie, I just think it's really hard. I just think it's really hard to use. So at this point in the class, if we were meeting under normal conditions, what I would have done is I would have mixed up like a batch of printmaking inks that we would then use for this next part. Because I actually like to do monotypes if we have like the press and the print shop available. But we don't have those things available. So what we're gonna do is like these paper collages, which it uses some of the same thinking as the monotypes, but it's a much more, it's just a much more direct process. And it's not like we all have printmaking presses in our own home. So what we're doing next is kind of like something I had to sort of devise to adapt to our current situations. So it's a little bit of a first for me, but I think it's gonna work out okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and angle my camera phone down to my work area, and I'm gonna pin that video so that you guys can see it. There's that, okay. All right, so for this next part, you're going to need your 3 fluid paints that you got. Everybody, on the Dick Blick list, there was a red, yellow, and a blue. And then there was also a white. And I have the same paint, but I've got mine in different sizes. I think I asked everybody to get kind of much smaller sizes. And then you also may find it helpful to have your fluid matte medium handy as well, because you can use that to actually extend your paint. But the fluid matte medium is actually really good, not only to extend the paint and kind of give the paint more body, but it's also very good to use as an adhesive once we actually start making our collages. And then additionally, what you're gonna want are just some plastic cups. Oops. Just some plastic cups to mix up color in. And I'm gonna grab my brushes and my water too. All right. Okay. So the reason I really like these fluid acrylics is because I can actually just squirt some like directly into the cup. And I'm able to kind of quickly mix up and visualize colors really fast. I'm actually going to start with a very pale yellow. I gave myself a good amount of white. What I get. And I usually kind of keep just like a piece of scratch paper nearby, just so I can kind of see what that color looks like on paper. Okay. So really pale yellow. And, you know, I can use this on its own, but I'm conscious about like trying to conserve the amount of paint that I have. And like, I don't have like a ton in here. And like, I have like kind of a lot of sheets of newsprint paint, right? So if I were to actually be painting like this, like if I was just kind of stick my brush in the newsprint and kind of like get that level of opacity on all of my newsprint pages, I'm gonna run out of paint really fast. And so that's where the fluid matte medium comes in. Is what I can do is I can mix up a color, and if I'm satisfied with it, I can actually add some matte medium to my paint. And I basically just like, I maybe added like about like a half and half mixture, like half medium, half paint. And I pretty much just doubled the amount of paint that I have. Now the thing is, it does slightly change the quality of my paint. It makes it more transparent. And what I always tell students is that when you add white to a color, like that lightens a color. It's like, it's kind of like adding like white, it's like adding milk into coffee, right? Like if you have a cup of coffee and you add milk into it, it's gonna become a lighter brown and it's also gonna become opaque, right? When you add matte medium to a color, you're also gonna lighten the color, but it's like you're adding water to coffee, right? So it's like the coffee stays brown, but the brown gets lighter and it becomes more transparent, okay? So that's kind of like what the matte medium does. It's like adding water to coffee. When you add white paint to a paint, it's like adding milk, and a matte medium is like adding water. So it makes my color a little more transparent, but it also gives me more paint to work with, which is really nice. So I'm gonna mix up just a couple colors to start with. So red, add some yellow in there. And in terms of like the color decisions I'm making, I'm just kind of being playful. Like I don't really have anything in mind. I just thought I would start with the yellow because I just felt like it. And then I said, well, what's gonna go with the yellow? And I'm gonna give myself a very bright orange.
Brian, Brian, we were wondering, are we strictly watching you right now and just learning and taking it in, or are we?
Oh yeah. You're not like following along mixing colors. Yeah, you're just watching. Yeah. Sorry, I actually meant to say that earlier. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Of course. I'm going to give myself one more just to start with.
Excuse me, Brian. Can we mix with like the open matte medium, the golden open? Is that going to matter too much, or as well with the retarder? Like I've got golden retarder and I've got the open matte medium.
I would hold off on the retarder for right now because that really slows down drying time. But we'll use the retarder when we start to actually mix acrylic paint and then use it for printmaking.
Okay. Is there a specific? But is there a fluid retarder, or is it just golden retarder? Okay.
Oh, the golden retarder will work. Yeah, the fluid, it just refers to the consistency, but they'll all work with each other. And the open matte medium that you have, that will work with this too.
Oh, okay. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Some of that. There. So I'm mixing three colors that are somewhat related to one another. They're all warm. That. And one thing that I think is kind of helpful to do, especially in the beginning, is to have a range of values. So, my little palette right here, I've got like quite a light value, a middle value, and then slightly darker. And I'm going to give myself just one more. I might actually, right at the end, maybe resist, like not add as much or even any matte medium to my paint, just to give myself like one that's really going to be quite opaque and therefore have kind of a higher value than the others. So maybe keep like one color free of matte medium. And that can really be sort of like a color that you use to create dark shapes or even paint on top of shapes after you've made them. There we go. There we go. So that's kind of my nice color range. And I'm going to start with this. I think that this is enough to start with, just these four. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my phone here. Hi. Okay. Okay. All right. And so I've got my work wall here, and I've got just 3 of my larger translation drawings that I've got all set up. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put paint on the back. So I've got the drawing on one side, and I'm going to apply color to the back. So taking my drawing, turning it around, just hitting it right up. So what I'm doing, oh, you know what? Let me get a rag really quick. Okay. So what I've got is like a fairly large brush, like it's maybe like about 2 to 3 inches wide. And it's just a regular old chip bristle brush. Like it doesn't need to be kind of fancy or anything like that. I actually think that size or width is more important because these are fairly large pieces of paper, right? And the thing is, if I try and paint the back of a large piece of paper with a tiny little paintbrush like this, like, I don't know if you guys have ever been in that experience, but that like painting stops being fun and just like turns into like grueling labor. Like when you try and like paint a huge area with like a tiny little brush. So I don't recommend doing that. Actually, I'm gonna change my video. Let me see if I can actually get this. Okay, I don't know if I'm able to do this. So we're just gonna go with that. Can you still see me okay? Yeah, okay. All right, so here is my drawing facing the wall. And there's a couple different ways you can go about this. You can just put color directly on. Because it is newsprint, you kind of have to be a little bit careful. And you don't want to use a ton of water because if you get the newsprint wet, then it's just going to like wrinkle and fall apart. But you can also apply color with more expressive marks. Maybe less evenly. Which, you know, these chip brushes, if you have anything like this, I find that actually cheaper brushes like make like really nice like expressive marks because the bristles separate when you're painting. And I quite love it for that reason. right? It's up to the camera so you can get a better look. So you can see it's definitely not an even application by any stretch of the imagination. Really so much as just like an expressive texture. And in some ways, the lighter value paint becomes very difficult to see because it almost is very similar to the value of the newsprint itself. But that's okay, because like, again, once I cut these up, these ultimately become the pieces that I can use for my collages. Switch to my orange here. Okay, now this one, I'm actually going to go ahead and blend my two colors together on the back. So I like that I kind of get like a nice, almost like a gradient, like between the two. And as I finish, or rather as I paint each one, I'm just taking it off and like I'm putting it off to the side so we can get it out of the way.
Brian,
Yes.
are we going to be using the 3 papers that you're painting on? Are we going to be cutting them up and using them together? Like, what type of thought did you put into the 3 papers that you chose to paint on? Are they going to be used individually or together in the collage?
Either or, actually. So I can cut, so the one that I painted yellow, I can cut that one up and make a collage out of only that one. Or I can combine it with the ones that I painted with the others. So it's like, I'm really in this process where I'm just like, I think like I'm just generating material. Like I'm almost like making my own materials that I can use any which way that I want. Does that make sense? Yeah. One thing I will say, because I've only got right now I've only got 4 paints that I mixed up. I'm trying to actually think to myself, okay, what are all the different ways I can use these different paints? Like I can take 4 pieces of paper and I could paint an even coat of each color on the back of each, but that's like not all the ways that I can use my paints. I can kind of be more expressive. I can blend them together, or I can actually layer them on top of one another, which is what I'm about to do. But like, I would just encourage you for each batch of colors that you mix up, just to think about all the different ways that they can be used and combined. The end result is that you just want, like the goal for this part of the process is that we just want the back of the drawings that you just made covered in color by any means necessary, right? Because like what we will then do is let them dry, cut them up, and then use those to make like sort of the next part of the project. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's again, like I'm not like painting a painting here. I'm sort of thinking about like, okay, what are all the ways I can use my paints to create interesting color combinations, interesting textures, so that when I cut them up, they can then become interesting elements in a non-objective collage. You know what I mean? All right, I'm gonna do one more. I'm gonna take my yellow, my lightest color. No, yeah, I'm gonna take my lightest color. Get a little bit of water, just so it spreads. Okay. Got a fairly even coating of yellow. It's not super even, but it's okay. It's just the base layer. And I'm gonna dry off my brush. And I'm gonna jump straight to that darkest color, the one that I didn't add any matte medium to, and that's quite opaque. And using a fairly dry brush, I'm just gonna like drag, almost like dry brush across it, just to create some visual texture. There we go. Okay. All right. So very, very active. And quite a lot of like color contrast because I'm using my lightest color and my darkest color. And of course, my dark color is a kind of purple and my base is a yellow, and they're complements. So of course there's a lot of like vibration here. But my main goal in showing you these things is just to get you thinking about all of the different ways to get color with one brush onto the backs of these things. Because you're gonna want a range of textures and colors and values that you can play with. You may have intuited this. The reason I have you guys turn the drawings around and paint the backs is because I would like you, when you're painting, to not be thinking about the lines of the shapes, right? Like if you paint the drawing, if you were to have the drawing facing you while you're painted, it starts to become almost like a fill in the lines, like kind of like paint inside the lines situation, and that's not what we want. What we want is a kind of randomness of paint application that, when you cut them along the lines, will surprise you. And like that surprise that you have, that you find with these materials that you're creating, that you can use that as an element in the work. Does that make sense? Yeah. I just realized actually that my microphone is on my laptop, but not my computer. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, good, good. I'm like, it's a little bit like, I don't know where to look, like, yeah. I wish you could see the setup. It's totally kooky. Okay, so as I paint, I'm just kind of I'm gonna put my painted paper on the floor and just totally let it dry. But I would just say, go ahead and paint all 18, and then just fully let them dry before you start cutting them apart. And my method, I would probably mix up like 3 or 4 colors, like I have it, and start to use those in different combinations and different layers, etc. And then I would probably use them until I run out, and then mix up 4 more or 3 more, and then keep on going with those. Like I could probably do about 2 or 3 more pieces of paper before I would have to mix new batches of paint. And I think if you just kind of make your paints in batches and kind of layer them in batches, you'll just end up with some really interesting results. Okay?
Do you want us to like just start with like 3 or 4 colors as like a base challenge, or it's like to our heart's content, however many colors we want?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess like earlier, hang on, I'm gonna go back to this. Second. There we go. Okay, now I'm gonna angle that down. Right. So I do think that's like, that kind of gets straight to the heart of like, I think everybody has their own relationship to color. I will say this, if I mix up like 10 colors, I start to use all of them and everything like turns into mud really quickly. So I find it really helpful, this is just me, to work in small batches of colors that are interrelated to one another, like they're all warm, or they're all analogous, or they're complementary. Like they just have some kind of relationship to each other. Or sometimes I'll mix up like a really big batch of one color, and then I'll pour that color into 3 other cups, and then make that color into other colors so they all have some kind of shared relationship. I think there's a lot of different ways to work with color, but in general, I recommend working in small batches of color and trying to find unusual ways to combine just those colors, rather than giving yourself a whole bunch of options right from the beginning. One thing I am going to ask you to do don't take paint directly out of the bottle and put it on the back of the page. Like, do something to it. Even if you add a very small amount of matte medium to it or a very small amount of the color, do something just to make that color your own, as opposed to just taking it and kind of like squirting it right on the page. Because you'll end up, I think you'll be happier with the end result in that case. I feel like that was like a non-answer to your question. Is that at all helpful?
Yeah, you answered it.
Okay, yeah. So it's like, I'm almost done with my yellow, orange, purple scenario. So like my next batch, I could focus on blues, you know, and have like a batch of blues or a batch of blues and purples. But that's my little method. Ultimately, when we cut them all up, you will have like a full range of color, because you'll have all these pieces of paper that have been painted with different ones. You just want to make sure that the colors stay kind of like pretty and true before, so that you can still kind of collage with them. Unless, you know, I mean, this is why color is so difficult. I actually think that there's a lot to be said for colors that are like ugly. And I think that you can really kind of find a way to use those. So maybe you do have 1 or 2 pages in your arsenal where you just layer all the colors that you can and make some that are just truly crazy colored, and those may actually end up becoming really useful pieces. So it's up to you. But I tell you what, let me go ahead and do this. Oh, I've got some chats. Did someone get kicked out? Oh no, these are people asking. Okay. So yeah, so Ayana was asking about the color mixing. Let me go ahead and run through the slides that I've got of different artists who sort of use these techniques and use this process. And that actually may give you some color ideas, because I think one of the things that they all do a little bit differently is that they all use color a little bit differently. So I'm gonna get rid of my chat and I'm gonna go back to gallery view. And what I am gonna do, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, here we go. Can you guys see my screen okay? Yeah, okay. All right, so this is our course canvas. Syllabus, materials list, here's our daily Zoom videos, and then down here I just made this module called Collage Project, and in here is the Collage Artist PowerPoint. And so you can find that. So I'm just gonna run through it really quickly, but just know that it is available for you on our course canvas page. Actually, move this out of the way. Okay. Okay, so these are all artists who essentially do a version of what we're doing. They make collaged artworks, and they're really just working with color and shape and line, and to a certain degree, texture. So those are kind of like the materials that they're working with. And even though their approaches are very similar, I think what's really interesting about this process is just how varied they can be. So Michael Cutlip is a collage artist who generally works in a square format. And I would say on the whole, his collages veer towards the simple and also the saturated. He doesn't use a tremendous amount of shapes, but what he does rely on is often a couple of very large shapes and a lot of really saturated color. Notice also, he has a combination of lines that are cut and lines that are torn. And I think that kind of shift in edge is like, it's a very subtle but very powerful effect. Like this line quality is quite different than this line quality. And this one tends to, this tends to have more of a handmade quality, whereas this almost feels, it's almost like we notice it less. Like the torn edge kind of draws more attention to itself than the cut edge. I think that this hot pink, or kind of like fluorescent purpley pink that is happening right here. One of the reasons it's so vibrant is that it is against this gray. And one of the interesting things that happens with color is that, of course, we don't experience color in isolation. We experience color in certain context. So a color that is already bright can actually be made to appear more bright by placing it on top or surrounding it by something that is relatively neutral. And so this would be a wonderful example of a color that maybe feels kind of dead. The only reason this piece works is because the artist has actually paired a dead or neutral color with a color that's very bright. Here's another example, and you can see a combination of cut edges and torn edges. And I believe that he actually is using some collage material that has a little bit of printing on it. Like there's obviously some typography here, but because of the way he's manipulated his pieces, we can't really see or read what's there. So we actually interpret these really, we can read them as letters, but they really kind of read more as abstract shapes because they don't have any kind of semantic meaning. Another thing about his pieces is look how layered they are. I think he actually makes a collage on top of a collage on top of a collage. And so the pieces ended up feeling kind of dense. And they're sort of like an abstract painting in that way, where the artist is kind of like layering, trying to find this composition. On the other hand, Lori Glavin, who also uses painted paper in her work, I would say that her pieces are actually quite thin. There are not a lot of layers, and she pretty much cuts all of her edges. And something that I think is really kind of elegant and beautiful about her work is she has a really beautiful paint application. So she will paint directly onto paper, and she usually layers only one color. And so there's a subtle texture to all of her pieces, but really they just kind of hum. And so this light blue, it's like one layer of paint on a piece of paper. And so the blue is really vibrant and electric because the blue is sitting on top of a white. And all these, you know, they're all just painted once, but she really finds these wonderful and very musical combinations of shape and color. And again, here she's using that trick that Michael Cutlip did, where she puts a fluorescent green on top of a gray in order to really make it pop. And so here is sort of that same trick used again, and she actually is building a collage of colored paper on top of a dark ground. And so the piece really appears to glow. She has this central form that's made up of all these small shapes, and it really appears to glow and be vibrant and come forward because, of course, it's sitting on top of this black ground. And so for us, we could actually take one of our large pieces and paint it quite dark, and then build smaller pieces on top of that. Sort of use one painted piece of paper as a base for others, which I think is something that she does to great effect. She kind of has a gray ground here, which really allows us to see and appreciate the subtle purples, the subtle shifts between the purples and the greens that she uses here. We can really read those subtleties much clearer because they're sitting on top of a neutral ground. Okay, so just kind of look at the difference in line quality between Lori Glavin and Michael Davison. And so these are actually cut and torn in a much rougher manner. And so I think that that just gives the image a very different quality. They're a lot rougher. He's not using scissors or an X-Acto. I think one of the things he's using is actually paper that is handmade and pigmented. This kind of looks like handmade paper to me. It also looks like construction paper that's just really, really old. But I love the rough quality of these. Like, I think that they're actually really beautiful. And notice that they're not perfectly square. So this, where my cursor is going, this is actually the edge of the piece right here. And I think that that's a really interesting kind of use of the collage, is that the outer edge of the image determines the outer edge of the piece. So this is really just three colors: the yellow, the green, the gray. And I think just by alternating and layering, he's really able to kind of get like a very rhythmic composition. It has those beautiful torn qualities. And again, notice the outer edge of the piece is not exactly square. So the image itself is a shape that's kind of rough, almost like the shapes that are inside the image. Once again, just 3 colors, the yellow, the brown, and the black. And notice how he uses small dots kind of on top of each one, like he puts a dot of this yellow on top of this brown. And that kind of joins these two, or a dot of this yellow on top of this black, and then they are joined. He kind of uses those dots as a motif to move your eye throughout the piece. A bit bolder, and you can clearly see here the outer edge of the collage. Okay. Antonio Corral, a Spanish artist who uses very evenly cut and painted paper to make these just very beautiful and rhythmic collages. And you can see here, he starts with contour drawings of shapes and various forms, but then I think he also is kind of cutting into those shapes and giving them these kind of like expressive and explosive qualities. So this shape here appears like it might have been cut from, or I'm sorry, drawn from like a house plant or some kind of organic form. But notice here, he kind of starts to cut those deep zigzags. This is probably the negative of this. Like he probably was cutting this shape out of here, and this was what was left over. Another thing that I like that he does is he almost treats his collages like a book. And so there's a fold in the paper here, and it's almost like this is an illustrated book, and this is the piece on the left and the piece on the right. So it's almost like he has multiple compositions inside a singular collage. And look how he treats the edge. Like, I really like that little detail, these kind of strips of painted paper that move all along the edge. And this is another artist that's really relying on like a gray and a black to allow his colors to really shine. And this piece is entirely value-based. It's actually entirely gray and black, made from stacked pieces that are organic, but then also geometric. Okay. Barbara Campbell Thomas is a painter who was making, for a long period of time, she was making kind of traditional grid-based abstractions. And then she started making these collages out of pages cut out of her sketchbooks. She would paint in her sketchbook and kind of do color swatches. Kind of like when I was mixing up color, I would paint little patches on a page. I think she was doing that as a way to sort of prepare the colors for her paintings. And then she started to cut up those pages. So her pieces have a lot of really interesting paint application on them. And what I really like about her work is that the shapes themselves are all quite small. And so there's a lot of visual movement and visual rhythm. So unlike Michael Cutlip, who was using quite large shapes, she's using lots of little shapes. She also, as you can see, she will collage and then she will paint right on top of the collage too. So she doesn't necessarily stop just by cutting and pasting. She will apply small bits of paint to the finished collage as well as a way just to kind of keep your eye moving or create linear movement. And I think that that's really, you know, that is something that you guys can absolutely do as well. This is not like a one-size-fits-all approach. But you can see like here, this green strip, she has like that really beautiful paint texture. And then right next to this darker green strip, there's a slight texture, but it's much less watery than this. So in addition to a color shift, there's also a texture shift here. Again, you can see a lot of little pieces. So there's like a lot of little movement. And she's also using various patterned papers that she has in her house. Like, I think that this is probably wallpaper or maybe wrapping paper, or just pattern paper that she had lying around the studio that was maybe left over from another project. And so that is actually something I'm going to encourage you guys to do. If you have other papers, or, you know, Lori, I know that you said that you were actually in your art classroom at school. If you have like old projects or student work that, you know, maybe from like 10 years ago that someone's never going to come get, just go ahead and cut that up and feel free to incorporate that into your collage. Okay, this is sort of the artist that actually really got me thinking about this project. I like this woman's work quite a bit. Her name's Megan Brady, and she's a painter. She does paintings on canvas, but then she also started recently making these collages that are a mix of organic shapes, geometric shapes, but something that's not readily apparent from these images is just how like truly enormous these pieces are. So that is like a human-sized chair, and this is her studio, that's a door. And so you can really get a sense of just like how big this is. And she has this huge workspace that she works in. It's like studio of like your dreams. And she will roll huge rolls of paper out on the floor, like the kind of rolls of paper that you use to cover like a bulletin board in your classroom. And then she'll paint directly on them. She'll paint them flat colors, or she'll paint stripes or textured marks, and then cut those pieces up and make just these huge, huge collage pieces that have like all this wonderful movement inside them. So here she is at work, and you can kind of see a couple pieces in progress on the floor. She actually makes them on the floor and then kind of puts them up on the wall to sort of gauge their progress. And I think she's, you know, like an average size person. So this is just really like a huge piece. But then here they are installed in kind of like a gallery space. So you can kind of really get a sense of all the color rhythms that Mark making. And much like Barbara Campbell Tombas, I think that she collages pieces, but then she will paint on top of them to create sort of visual movement and line work, just to kind of move our eye through the piece. So here she is in progress, and you can kind of see just like this is, I think that this is maybe a piece like in the early stages. She has yet to kind of cut it up, but she's almost making an abstract painting on this piece of paper, which she will then cut up and rearrange into sort of one of these larger compositions. Okay, I'm gonna stop the share and go back to gallery view. And so that's just like a range of people who I think are doing something like really similar to what we're doing. They're basically taking paper, they're painting it through a variety of methods, they're cutting it up, and they're rearranging it. And I like the fact that what we are starting with is, on one side, we have a series of lines that we can cut along and kind of create shapes. And on the other side, we have color that's been applied in different ways that we can then kind of work with. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go and cut the ones apart that I started with, and just on my little work surface here, start to make a little collage and talk a little bit about some methods that I would use to attach the pieces. And that'll probably be it for the day. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions about what we just looked at? So everyone's going to make like 10-foot collages like in their home, and you know, like they're going to be the size of like a 12-foot ladder. Yeah, great. I really like those Megan Brady pieces. I saw those when I first saw them. I was like, oh, those are cool. And then I saw a photo of them like with her standing next to them. I'm like, oh my God, they're enormous. Like, that's so awesome.
I just took some notes on her because I always start the year with a school collaborative piece. I was trying to think of how, like, if I have 6 classes a day and 8 tables, you know, depending on how we get to go back in the fall, if I put a large piece of paper on each table, each kid draws one line from somewhere, one edge to edge.
100%.
So that's like 4 lines to divide the space, and then they flip it over and they each work together to paint the page, like what we're about to do.
Yeah.
And then the next week they could cut it apart, and then they could, as a school, attach it to the wall and break all the fire codes to create a giant collage mural. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the other things that she's doing, I know she has like she's a mom and she has like young kids, and I think she will actually take their drawings and basically like kind of do what we did with our contours. Well, she will recreate their drawings on a large scale with like a paintbrush and color, and then like, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure those of you who teach elementary school, I mean, like, young kids are like the best abstract artists I've ever seen in their life. I mean, their line work is just so free. It's just so uninhibited. And I think she really wants those qualities in her work. So she kind of uses her kids' drawings as inspiration. So in some ways, they're kind of like collaborations with her children, which I love. You know, it's like she kind of uses their work just to get going, but then she, the mom, kind of like recontextualizes it and recomposes it. I love that. Okay, so this is acrylic paint, and I put matte medium in it. I did not put the retarder in it because I do want it to dry very quickly, and it's dry to the touch. So what I can do is flip it over and just start to cut it apart. And see, yeah. You know, I can cut along my lines. I'm not going to be real fussy about it. Like, I'm not going to pull out my X-Acto and perfectly cut along my lines. Myself some nice organic shapes here. You know, it's funny, I was just doing my slideshow, and I always like to show contemporary artists, but of course, like the grandfather of this technique, which kind of a bad teacher, I didn't include him, is of course Matisse. Like Matisse is kind of like later in life, like painted paper collages, most of which he made from bed. Those, I think, are really kind of like enduring examples of just how kind of simple, how kind of like beautiful and simple, like how beautiful and elegant simplicity can be. And it's really just very humble materials, just painted cut paper. But I mean, some of those collages are like the greatest things you've ever seen in your life. And I don't know if you've ever gotten the chance to see any of his collages in person, but they're huge, you know, and for sure, someone like Megan Brady would, in 2020, would not be making collage work on that scale were it not for Matisse. Okay.
another one of the artists you showed us seemed to be influenced by him too. I can't remember what his name was.
Yeah. Oh, the guy with the kind of explosions that was sort of layering, Antonio Carrera. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay. So here's some of these. So I'll cut up my blend. I'm excited for you guys. I just want to be in here and do this the rest of the day. I have to grade discussion videos for I'm also teaching an online art appreciation class, which is a general education, like everybody has to take it, like art history light class, and it's a very different vibe than this. Let me put it that way. Okay, so this is interesting. So I just kind of cut this piece, this strip, and when I turn it over, I really have like more than one color on here. Like I've got that like little red edge at the end. And that is kind of like an unexpected surprise that like I could actually use that to like build an entire composition. And so I really enjoy that. And I mean, not everybody takes this approach, but like one of my criteria for my work, I don't really know if it's a criteria for my work, but it's definitely a criteria for my process, is that I need to be surprised. I have to be surprised by what happens in the studio. I know that if I am surprised by what comes out of my process, I will be engaged. As opposed to like, I think I want to make this, I plan it all out here, I get all the stuff together, and then I do it. I start at point A and I end at point Z, and it progresses in a linear fashion. Like, I definitely admire work like that and artists who can work like that, but I have learned over the years that that's not necessarily for me. And I've noticed that a lot of my students think that really that's kind of how art happens. It's like you just kind of progress from one point to the next. And I think students in general are delighted to learn that there's more than one way to make a piece of art, and that one of those ways can involve actually surprising yourself.
Brian, I just wanted to comment on the line work of the torn pieces versus the more, precise cut ones. I teach middle school art, and that's like behavior problem central. And so there was a kid I had who was very destructive in the class. He just loved to go grab pockets full of like crayons and be breaking them up during my class. And as soon as I came around, he'd chuck them across the class. I mean, he anything he could get his hands on, he would just break it down and then destroy it. And he would never participate or do the art. And we were doing collage, and I was very particular at this point for everyone to learn how to, more than just the assignment, I just even wanted them to learn how to hold a pair of scissors and cut correctly.
Yeah.
And he wasn't having it.
Sure.
Then I said, you know what? Why don't you rip your pieces? I think maybe, and he looked at me and he was like, I'm not going to do it. And I was like, yeah, just watch this. I just ripped a bunch of it. Lo and behold, he got so into that. And from that point on, he was so involved in the stuff he came out with his rip pieces were powerful. And the colors too were, wow, man, they were just like insane what he was doing. And I just could not believe it. I was like, wow, who would have known, we could just go ahead and utilize your destructive tendencies and find something that's more, appropriate for you. And he took off with it. And that was like case closed. No more problems out of him. He couldn't wait to get in and get seated and get busy. So it was a game changer for him doing the rip edge.
Yeah, I mean that's really, well, first of all, that's a really awesome teacher move, I think, to be like, okay, I've got this kid who's got this like one kind of energy, in my room, and it's like I've just got to find a way to use it. Like it's not going anywhere, right? I've got to find a way to use it. And like that, I mean, can you imagine? I just don't think you can do things like that if you teach social studies. You know what I mean? Like there's not a way to like
take a kid's, there's not a way to sublimate your own rage when you're studying like like English, but there is, I think, in art, you know, and I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so I'm cutting these up, and as you can see, I'm just using my lines as a loose guide. But what I end up with is a lot of material that I can start to compose. In fact, I think I got way too much on, so I'm gonna have to put some of this on the floor. By the way, all this started by me drawing a thing of Tupperware. You know what I mean? Like that, like don't forget, that's like where this came from, you know, and that exercise is just, it, to a certain extent, especially in students, it's just like, oh my God, we're like making drawings and not even looking at them. But it's like, we gotta start somewhere. Okay. And so, little by little, what I can start to do is just build a composition. Those textured marks that happened when I was painting now become these like really super helpful elements for me to actually play and move color around. And like the brush strokes that are happening like on this piece, like my kind of piece where I sort of scumbled my purple paint over my yellow, like I can actually look at the movement that's happening with that brush strokes and look at the movement that's happening with the shape, and I can say, aha, like just by combining those two. Like this painted stroke, this line kind of now continues onto that line. And so these pieces become linked in a way that is interesting and surprising. And I never, it's better than anything I could have consciously decided to do. You know, it's a way that I actually was able to manufacture a kind of surprise. And so I could choose to highlight that by kind of layering a piece underneath. And the other thing is, I think you should feel free to use negative space. Like I can actually flip a piece over and use the back and kind of rely on that color of newsprint to create an area of rest. The other thing is that I should not feel like I should feel okay to just make adjustments to my pieces as needed, right? Like they're all just raw material that I can use. So just because like this is the shape that I got when I cut along the lines, it doesn't mean it has to stay that shape, right? I can just kind of, I can cut a shape out of it. I could cut a letter out of it. Or I could cut a letter out of it and then cut that letter in half to arrive at a new abstract shape. It's almost like, I don't know, I think what every artist needs to do to a certain extent is kind of create a set of rules that they follow in order to sort of see a piece through to the end. So I think that what we should do as a group is paint our paper, let it, and again, like I was talking about, think about all the different ways that you can kind of use a select set of colors to create a range of different painted textures on the back. But even if you paint them all evenly, you'll still get this kind of painted texture, and that can become just a really wonderful element. You don't necessarily have to have kind of more even textures up against visual textures. It's really it's really whatever you want to do. And then let them dry and cut them up and start to actually compose them and lay them around. I think the main criteria for this process should be surprise. You should allow yourself to be surprised. And in terms of how you make a composition and how you decide something is finished, I would just actually look for those unexpected connections that can happen between shapes as a way to kind of move the project along. So I'm gonna pin my workstation video here. Okay, so here's my curve piece, and the curve of this, I have this really cool kind of like purple piece with this kind of strange form right here, and I really like that curve, and so I can accentuate it. But that way, I end up losing the other part of my red piece here. So what I can do is I can lay that on, and there we go. Like now, I have this kind of relationship to play with. Get rid of the white on here. Okay. So I just cut a piece of my kind of regular yellow paper to balance that out. Okay. So this might be a good starting point. I've kind of got this motion in the center. I think I could add more of my orange, but like, let's say I want to actually begin with this. And like, I want to refresh your memory of the Michael Cutley pieces, just how layered those were. Like I could actually create like a base layer and say, okay, I'm just going to start with this. And then I could actually add more pieces to it later that maybe ultimately cover this up or sort of play off of it. You know, maybe I actually add so much that only really this area here ends up becoming like what's visible in the finished product. As I kind of paint more paper, cut up more paper, layer more shapes, the color climate of this piece might actually totally change, which is really exciting. But let's say I actually do want to start with this. What you can do is you can use this fluid matte medium like an adhesive, right? You can actually, just with a small brush, just, let's see, start with this down here. You do not need a ton, just a little bit. There we go. That's on there. Oh. So that piece is on there. It's not going anywhere. And then the other thing you can do is, of course, you can use your glue sticks. All right. So what I usually do is I recommend that everybody make 5 collages. 5 collages. You've ultimately got 18 pieces of paper to work with. All 18 of them could be painted differently. Half of them could be the same and the other 9 could be painted differently. But out of all this material, I'm gonna ask that you guys generate 5 collages. And what I'm gonna ask that you do is, how do I wanna say this? Oh, somebody got kicked out. I'm gonna let them back in. There he is. What I'm gonna ask you to do is, do you remember when we were using the Finder to actually translate the contour drawing into this? And I was saying, give yourself a range of possibilities. Look for areas that are really dense and have a lot of shapes, and look for areas that are really minimal and have a few shapes. I'm gonna ask you to do the same thing with your collages. Try and create some that are really dense and have many pieces, and try and create some that are really like open and maybe actually have only a few pieces, and then everything in between, and then everything in between. I don't wanna give you guys size restrictions. If your collages are the size of your hand, like they're quite small, I think that that would actually be quite lovely. I mean, maybe you have all this material, but you only end up using like little tiny pieces of it. But I also think if you get really into this and you really just want to go quite large, like I don't know if anybody wants to go like Megan Brady type large. I mean, that's pretty intense. But yeah, like I also am not going to say that all 5 have to be the same size. So what do we think? Any questions?
I missed the glue, the kind of glue you used on the first part, on the first one. You had 2 glues. What was the first one?
The first one, it actually is that matte medium that I was putting in, like in the paint. the matte medium just painted like directly on the back of the piece of paper by itself, it works as like a great adhesive. And actually, maybe you guys have sort of noticed this over years of teaching. Another really great adhesive, paint. Like you can put like paint on the back of something and just slap like a color and slap it down of 2 pieces of paper. And as the paint dries, they'll be stuck together. So yeah, sometimes, I mean, with collage, like, you know, putting glue on with a brush can be a little unwieldy, which is why I wanted you guys to have the option of also using like a glue stick.
One more question. So what, you know, we got like on our list was like 6 papers of, I don't know what kind of paper. Yeah. Are those what we use to, no, probably not. What do we glue this down onto? It doesn't matter?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. I actually don't, I don't think you should glue it down on anything. I think you should just glue pieces to each other, and like you can kind of cut the outer edge when you're done to make it into a rectangle, or you can kind of let the edge of the collage be the edge of the piece. So it could have these irregular edges, like not unlike the Francis Davison pieces. Now, if you, now Jessica, if you want to mount it on something, like maybe you have some dark paper around and you want to mount your like light color collage on a dark ground so it kind of glows, like the Lori Glavin. If you want to do that, by all means, go for it. But the idea is that, like, you know, this is really inexpensive paper. It's really like non-precious. And the reason that we do that is to encourage you to kind of like treat it like just whatever and just kind of cut it up. But if you want to actually kind of like really mount it and make it kind of pretty and finished and polished, go for it. The drawing paper that you got though, we're gonna hold off on using that because we're gonna actually use that when we start making books and patterns. Okay. So yesterday we were drawing spoons and things like that, and today we're painting paper and cutting it up and making heroically scaled abstract collages. We're off to the races. Okay.
I have one more question.
Sure.
So I realized that I left all my brushes at the school, and so I won't be using them. Do you have like a recommendation on good brushes that are just good in general? I'm one of those people, I'm like, I'm gonna spend money, I might as well spend money. Like if something, it needs to be good. So do you have any recommendation on brushes?
For this particular process, I honestly think that the best types of brushes are like the 95-cent ones that you can get at Lowe's that are like, you know, 3 inches wide or 2 inches wide, because we really are, I mean, like I was saying before, like you don't want a brush that's really small when you're painting like the back of like, you know, a fairly large piece of paper, because then it's just not fun. It just takes forever. When you get a high quality brush that's also large, it's like $80. I mean, it's like they end up becoming like so expensive. So it's like, it's less important that the bristles like have a lot of spring to them or that they don't like get rusty down here. You know, it's like those things don't really matter. What matters is that it's big. And so because it's big, I just recommend actually not spending good money on them because all you really want is just a brush that you can slap paint down on a surface. Additionally, these kind of interesting textural qualities, like I actually feel like a nice brush is less inclined to do this. You know what I mean? It's like it won't really give you that texture. Like this kind of paint texture, that is symptomatic of kind of a poor quality brush. But with this particular process, I think that ends up being kind of a nice thing to play with. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's the answer we all want to hear, being like, oh, actually, the solution to your problem is $5. You know, that's all you need. There you go. Anybody else? No? Okay. So just to reiterate, well, first of all, I'm gonna stop recording in a minute, and I will put all this online, so the whole thing will be available on Course Canvas. But I'm going to give you guys the full workday tomorrow to make your collages. If you have any questions, I will be on my computer because, as I mentioned, I have a lot of grading to do. So just email me or hit me up with a question. If we need to hop on Zoom, we can. I might be in like my house. I can't promise I'll be like in the studio. So there may be like a little dog like walking in front of me, but he's very cute. Just let me know if any kind of issues come up. And then on Thursday, we will pick up where we left off and kind of come back together at 8 a.m. Online. And as usual, I'll send out a Zoom link at like 7:50, 7:45, so that we can all get in on the same place. Okay? Great. Are there any final questions or anything like that? Okay, wonderful. Well, guys, I'm super excited about this. I really got excited kind of cutting those pieces up, and I actually kind of want to stay here and like make collages myself, but have fun. And like the #1 criteria for this project is surprise. And also don't let yourself get like precious with it. Just feel free to kind of paint and chop and hack away. Okay?
Hey, last minute question. So just to make sure, we're not meeting tomorrow?
No, we're not going to meet tomorrow. Go ahead and actually take the whole day to work on these collage pieces.
Okay.
And also, I believe some of you, there are a couple people who, as part of their degree, you're enrolled in a class that is meeting tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to set up a work day for that reason because Jackie had expressed it was a bit of a
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's big.
Yeah.
That's huge. Thank you.
Okay, that's it, guys. I'll pause the recording and I'll start getting that converted and uploaded, and I'll see you all on Thursday. But don't hesitate to reach out if any issues come up. Bye-bye.
Hi, thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thanks a lot.
Of course.